Hello everyone, Books with Banks back again with another video, and today I'm back with another book review. I continue slowly but surely to read through, my read through of Janny Wurts' epic fantasy series, The Wars of Light and Shadow. They're all up there. Today I will be reviewing book 3 in the series, Warhost of Vastmark. I read the bulk of this in March, only finishing it just at the beginning of April. Before going too far, a couple of housekeeping notes. First, if you haven't already and wouldn't mind liking and subscribing, I would really appreciate it. Thank you. Also, I won't be going into any heavy spoilers for the first half of the video, but then I'll get into some of the characters, specific storylines and fates, things like that, big moments. I'll talk about all of that in the second half, but I'll signal that too when I make that shift, that switch to my more spoiler-filled kind of thoughts. And of course, as this is book 3 in the series, a lot of my thoughts will wind up falling into that spoiler section. It's just too hard to even really summarize what this book is about without giving away big things from books 1 and 2. But anyway, here we go. First, a brief overview of this series and this book's place in the unique series structure. So, 10 books are currently out and the 11th is on its way. This series, The Wars of Light and Shadow, tells the story of two half-brothers ripped from their homeworld and brought into the lands of Ethera, wherein the Fellowship sorcerers are hoping these two half-brothers can reconcile their differences and work together to defeat the Mist Wraith, a powerful, magical, sentient enemy that has shrouded all of Ethera in this dense fog and mist for a very long time. The brothers' confrontation with said Mist Wraith warps destinies and prophecies and sends the continent into a series of violent conflicts in the many books and years to come. So the series is broken up into 5 arcs. Arc 1 consists of 1 book, Arc 2 consists of 2 books, including this one. Arc 3 consists of the middle 5 books, then Arc 4 is back to 2, and then the forthcoming Arc 5 will just be book 11. Because I've just read book 3, Warhost of Vastmark, we only need to worry about arcs 1 and 2, but mainly arc 2. This book and this arc in general, I'd say, have a lot to do with the failure of characters to think critically and look past their biases or their prejudices when it comes to like the propaganda against and vilifying of enemies in war times. We are presented with 2 vastly different approaches to leadership, and we get to see 2 strategies for gaining allies and loyalty. On one side, you have a leader blinded by this idea of justice and the just cause in warfare, and on the other side, you have someone painfully restrained by compassion and empathy for any and every kind of small community of civilians that he encounters. You also have some of the most realistic and brutal depictions of violence in warfare. Wurts gives us this rivalry between the Fellowship sorcerers and the Coriathane Order, 2 rival and often passive-aggressive organizations of magic users. Something else in this book, we see time and time again our standoffish and oft-hated protagonist surrounding himself with his harshest critics, only for them to slowly but surely learn how they've been sort of shallow and misled. Wurts does this sort of character arc 2 or 3 sort of very notable times in this book in particular. And one of these characters that she kind of works with it's an arc that spans really the first 3 books of the whole series, and I think she executes it really well. And the other, another one of these character arcs is just kind of more of a short story adventure put into the middle of this book, but the payoff with who that character is and someone else that she's related to, a conversation they have, the payoff in that scene is really, really great, really powerful. Anyway, I think I've said about as much and been about as vague as I can be for this spoiler-free section. One final thought, if you're turning off the video now before you go, real quick, just know that Wurts continues to outdo herself with this series. I've liked each book more than the last, and the payoff that this book has for this 2-volume long second arc, it's really satisfying. Not only does she conclude the storylines of this arc in a satisfying way, but by the end of it, there are hints of how tumultuous the continent's political situation is going to be moving forward into future volumes and future story arcs. And I'm really excited to get into arc 3. But yeah, as I said, I'm about to talk about spoilers, so thank you for tuning in now, and I'll see you all next time. For those of you who don't care about spoilers or who've read this or up through this point, here we go. So, Arathon, Cephalon, Master Bard, Prince of Verthane, titles and other titles, he faces so much hardship in this book, and most of it stems from the fact that no one around him, even Dakar, the Mad Prophet, his right-hand guy, none of these people really trust him or see him as that good or virtuous. Even though the readers, we kind of know that he is very good. He is very virtuous. A great example of the perception of Arathon and then of how Arathon is able to navigate and correct that misperception comes early in this book with a character carrying over from the previous, from Ships of Marior, book 2. This is a guardsman or a captain of a guard, castle guard, who's been fired from his post for failing to stop Arathon in that book. And this character, a man named Theric, he seeks revenge against Arathon and blames him for, being embarrassed on the job, being fired. And the revenge that he takes against Arathon, it's this heartbreaking and just painful thing that he does. But we're not done with this man. Sure, that kind of sets a lot of things in motions for this volume in particular. But yeah, we're not done with, or Wurts isn't done with him. And what Janny Wurts is able to do with this Theric character, someone who does something so upsetting early on in the book, well, honestly, it's kind of just remarkable how Wurts continues to return and sort of check in on him. And I feel like this character would have just been a nobody, a pointless bystander in any other series. But honestly, every scene with Theric and another character, Janessa, and Janessa's 2 children, Fiark and Phelan, this sort of eventual family unit they form, those are my favorite parts of this book. I'm actually thinking about making a separate video at some point just to go through each of those characters, or at least Theric and Janessa, if not the twins, if not the kids, and do a deeper analysis of their respective relationships with Arathon. So I might just save that all and too much more comment on their storyline for another video. But I'd also love to hear other fans' thoughts down below in the comments about these two and their place in Arc 2 here. Anyway, in the spoiler-free section, I mentioned 2 characters Arathon basically wins over in some way, shape, or form, while you could definitely say he does this with Theric and that whole Theric-Janessa storyline. I think there's a lot more going on in that particular thread, so again, I'll probably save that for later. But one of the 2 main characters I was kind of alluding to was the Lady Talith, Prince Lysair's wife, and Lysair's Arathon's sworn enemy, half-brother. And a large section of the middle of this book is all about Arathon's plan to kidnap Talith and ransom her back to his half-brother, so that he can get the gold to buy resources to make a stronger defense for his newfound and small kind of group of allies in the southern mountains of Vastmark, so books Warhost of Vastmark. And it's a pretty good plan. It goes very well, and of course only makes Lysair hate Arathon more, to the point where Lysair might not even need Deshtir's curse to hate his half-brother. But where the storyline really pays off is in the tension and subtle conflict that emerges when Talith and Lysair are reunited. And while Arathon never gave Talith any reason to like him while she was his captive, he always very subtly, I think, demonstrated how he is definitely not a monster. He's definitely not the monster that his half-brother Lysair has made him out to be. So of course this only feeds into Lysair's confirmation bias. Even though Arathon has to be tricky in winning people over to his side to try and prevent a war, all Lysair sees is deception, manipulation, and danger. The other person, big character that Arathon has to win over, and this is someone who has been with and around Arathon the entire series so far. This is the Mad Prophet Dakar. His hatred of the Master of Shadow and love for the Lord of Light, all based on who was more charming and sociable in the first book. This bias and stance of Dakar's is really put to the test in this second arc. If anything, Dakar's growth is one of the more entertaining journeys to observe here. Wurts places Dakar in such predicaments, basically doing the bidding of his Fellowship Sorcerer Masters by working with and accompanying Arathon in his journeys throughout Ships of Merior and Warhost of Vastmark. But Dakar hates this guy. He can't believe his horrible luck. He's stuck with the wicked and boring brother instead of the funny, friendly, and princely brother. And the different ways that Wurts chooses to test Dakar throughout these books, but especially this one, these different scenes, these different moments create this really compelling growth arc of someone starting out perfectly comfortable living with his prejudice and debauchery, believably then transforming into someone happy to reflect on and revise those prejudices, even if he's still a little bit into the debauchery. And the payoff of what Dakar does, what he chooses to do at the end of this book, it's really powerful, beautiful, some beautiful scenes and conversations there. I also just want to talk about the warfare and the violence going on in this book. The big question looming large throughout is basically, how can we prevent the most people from dying? Lysair's marching his army this way anyway, so what can we do to try and avoid as much bloodshed as possible? That's basically the goal of our protagonists, and Arathon winds up making some really difficult decisions and doing things that would look pretty villainous if we weren't spending so much time with him. I think Wurts tries to show us how easy Arathon's making it for Lysair to make him look like a villain. Even if Arathon's choices really are the most peaceful and the best options, quick example of this would be the kidnapping of Talith. Obviously, kidnapping is not a good thing and doesn't look good. But the better example would be probably this massacre that happens near the end, before the big battle at the end. It's this massacre Arathon commits, basically a terrorist attack, to try and terrify and scare Lysair and Lysair's forces away from pursuing this war any further. This whole sequence is full of characters throwing out these like justifications and then judgments of each other, and it just really puts this emotional pit, or this emotional kind of like, I don't know, of like an icky feeling. That's not exactly what it is. It's just this sinking feeling in your gut, and it's the worst. And you know exactly how Arathon's enemies are going to spin this attack against him. And again, this is all because of how Wurts has set up our expectations so far. And throughout this scene, we, the readers, are just terrified that Arathon's gambit here isn't going to pay off. And sure enough, we return to the Lord Commander Deegan, Talith's brother and Lysair's second in command. Arathon intentionally leaves 25 survivors of his massacre, of his attack, to go relay the story and scare Lysair and his forces into deserting and or abandoning the war. And Lord Deegan, our Commander Deegan, learns about these 25 survivors first. And when I got to this scene, my mouth was wide open, and shock might not be the right word, because it's not the kind of shock where it comes out of nowhere, you know. When Deegan speaks with the 25 survivors, we all, I think, know what's coming, but we still can't believe what Deegan's about to do, or ordered to have done. And this is a setup, kind of payoff type of thing that spans the second arc of the series, because in Ships of Merior Book 2, at the very end, there is one person who knows the truth about the Curse of the Mistwraith, and that one individual could possibly share that information and weaken Lysair's warmongering cause in some way, shape, or form. And we see at the end of Ships of Merior how Deegan deals with that individual. And so when a similar scene happens on a much larger and much more tragic scale at the end of this book, we've already been shown this pattern before, and we know what Deegan's going to do. And it's just so frustrating, but so emotionally engaging. And it's really dark, but it is a satisfying payoff to something we got a glimpse of in Ships, and then now we get to see really a much more brutal version of Deegan's kind of war-centric kind of mindset. His Lysair's right, he has to be the most just, the best, and Arathon is totally the villain. Not only is Deegan like the best propagandist maybe for Lysair, but he's also bought into all of the propaganda, right? Which maybe you need you need to have done if you're going to be the best at, distributing all of the propaganda. Anyway, finally, getting into the conclusion, everything with the combat in the mountains is just brutal and miserable, whereas continues to display how not glamorous or heroic, nor heroic war actually is. And there was one simile that she used that I really wanted to point out that just works super well. She compares a rock slide and like a mountainside just falling apart, like a crocheted scarf or something. Coming apart and like fall, like, when something's crocheted and it's like the nice mesh and then it just like fizzles apart. And I just thought that was such a beautiful kind of simile she used, like juxtaposition there with like the soft and pretty crochet scarves being compared with like the violence of and brutality of this rock slide and all the people that are dying in that moment. Great stuff. Also, even though the book is for the most part a really dark and upsetting portrayal of war and violence and kind of the futile efforts to avoid all of that, the ending actually, I think, has a lot of hope and optimistic turns of events. For one, I already alluded to Dakar's character arc and this decision he makes. That scene and scenes deliver some great feelings, but also the political sort of strategy with kidnapping the Cibridian brothers, some allies of Prince Lysair. Arathon and his group, they kidnap them throughout the course and in the midst of this whole final battle in the mountains. And they're taking advantage of the course of the battle and how these brothers are all split up as a way to steal one of Lysair's most powerful allies away from him. I found that extremely satisfying, how Wurts subtly wove that secondary plan and kind of political sort of maneuvering and switching of alliances into the conclusion. Again, one additional satisfying thing on the top of an extremely satisfying novel. Anyway, if you couldn't tell by now, I love this book, and I hope more and more epic fantasy fans start checking out the series. I would also say, even if you give the first book a try and you're not the biggest fan or you're not sure how you feel about it, this next story arc told across books 2 and 3, I think it's better, and it demonstrates Wurts' strength even more than the first book does. She's so busy in Curse of the Mist, right, the first one, establishing like this historic world event with the curse and the brothers, their curse against each other and their rivalry, that she doesn't really get as much time to explore any of the wonderful character kind of stuff, or as like the deep contemplations on violence and warfare, or commentary on propaganda and prejudice, as she does in the second arc. In this arc, she really has more room to breathe and explore those themes. Again, there's hints of a lot of that in the first book, but I found the second arc delivered more satisfying character arcs that worked better in conjunction with those themes, like Deegan and Talith and the Cibridian brothers and Dakar, and of course, Theric and Janessa. But remember, I think I want to do a separate video about Theric and Janessa. All that said, one of my longer reviews, but it's totally worth it. What an amazing book. There you have it. That's my review for Janny Wurts' It's my review for Janny Wurts' Warhost of Vastmark, Book 3 in her Wars of Light and Shadow series. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.